It is with great pleasure that I would like to introduce our speaker of the day, Dr. Tatiana Borisova from the University of Florida. So Dr. Borisova is an associate professor and extension specialist in the Food and Resource Economics Department of the University of Florida. And she has also an interesting additional job, and she is now working with the Economic and Demographic Research Unit of the Florida Legislature, which is a state agency. And what she is going to present to us today is the result of a study, a very important study that can be of also very much interest to us in California, because Florida and California also on the different parts of the nation, of the continent, they face similar problems. Just a couple of words about the speaker. So as I mentioned, Tatiana is a professor, associate professor and extension specialist. She is well known for her work on water economics and policy that includes specifically work on water supply expenditures, costs and benefits, issues of risk, adoption, and conservation practices. So very similar to what we are facing with here, issues of urban water and conservation programs. So today, Tatiana is going to talk about the cost to meet Florida's future water demand and comparing it to the alternative of conservation and demand management, and whether or not the state can afford one or the other. Thank you very much for being with us, and we are all listening.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dinar, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm really excited to be here. Let me start sharing my slides. Okay, so I'm an extension specialist with the University of Florida, and I'll be presenting today the work that was conducted in support of the annual assessment of Florida water resources and conservation lands, the project which is led by the Florida legislature, and particularly one branch of the Florida legislature, Office of Economic and Demographic Research. I'm representing University of Florida. I cannot say I'm representing Office of Economic and Demographic Research, but I am more than willing to share some contact information for Dr. Matthew Cotillo and Ms. Kate Beggs, who are the economists with Economic and Demographic Research. This has been a great experience for me. I'll be presenting analysis which partially is included into this annual assessment of Florida water resources and conservation lands. It's not one-to-one copy of the report, because the report is published annually, and we have started updating this report since the last publication date, December. I would really encourage you to go and check this report for several reasons. One is that it's a comprehensive description of the project that I'll be briefly summarizing today. Secondly, in addition to the work that I'm describing, this report includes expenditures related to water quality programs in Florida, land conservation programs in Florida, and the very new chapter that Kate Beggs is actually leading is about infrastructure expenditure, maintenance and replacement of water and wastewater infrastructure. So very broad analysis focusing on statewide expenditure projections and trying to identify the gap between expenditure needs and revenues dedicated to different expenditure categories on the state level. The work is relying on data shared by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and 5 water management districts. And all imagery I'll be using are from University of Florida photo database. I hope you approach today's seminar as a lunch buffet. I know it's lunchtime in California, so I was thinking I'll talk a little bit about Florida. I'll present a few slides about water policy and regulations in the state. I'll give a little bit of a summary of economic fiscal analysis. My main focus today, though, is looking for opportunities to collaborate, asking for feedback from you all. I know there are many professionals in the audience. At some point, we will need to have a peer review of our products. So I'm looking for contacts. I'm looking for feedback. As Dr. Dinar mentioned, Florida and California are really similar in many respects. I'm from College of Agriculture and Life Science, so I'll start with a slide about agriculture. I think in California, there are about 400 crops. In Florida, we have about 350 crops. So 2 large specialty crop producing states. About 7.3 billion in agriculture cash receipts. Florida is a little bit larger, right? 50 billion. Still, citrus acreage, significant in Florida, even larger than in California. 4th in vegetable production, 2nd, very close to California in floriculture, and number 1 in sugarcane production. All these agricultural products require significant irrigation. You may ask why. We have 55 inches of rain per year compared to 18 in California. But similar to other places, all this rain falls in the wrong time or in the wrong place. Most of the rainfall occurs during summer months. It's very hard, therefore all the production happens during winter months. A lot of irrigation, and 50% of agricultural irrigation relies on groundwater withdrawals. With respect to population growth, California, Texas, and Florida are 3 most populous states in the nation. Florida is called home by more than 20 million people already, and we are growing with about 1,000 people per day. It's about 2%. Well, we used to grow with about 2% per year before the pandemic. The most recent estimates is about 1.4% per year population growth, which is still significant. I was looking at the numbers, say about 2% per year growth rate, and thinking when Florida population would reach California population, 40 million people. Well, if California stops growing today and Florida continues with about 2% per year, we would reach California within about 30 years, which is actually not too far away. It's within the long-term planning horizon for many water supply planners. So very soon, Florida will have similar population to California. And you will notice that the same states that were displayed as the most populous states in the nation on the previous slide, they also stand out on this slide. This is a graph from USGS showing water withdrawals across the nation, starting from the western states on the left, Hawaii, to the eastern states on the right, US Virgin Islands, and you would see the highest bars for California, Texas, and Florida. Among the eastern states, Florida really stands out. And you may say, well, a lot of withdrawals are for thermoelectric power plants, which means once through withdrawals and immediate return. But when we focus on groundwater withdrawals specifically, this is primarily consumptive use, or at least in Florida, it is considered to be consumptive use from groundwater. Again, east of Mississippi River, it's Florida and Mississippi that really rely on groundwater withdrawals. And not surprisingly, groundwater levels are showing some signs of reduction on regional level. This is a state nationwide map. And if you look at Florida specifically, there are some colors of yellow and maybe greenish in the northern part of the state, meaning that there are indications that groundwater levels are declining on the regional level. On the local level, there are some extreme examples. On the left-hand side, the map shows a bunch of green dots of different colors. Green here does not mean good. It actually means that these are water systems that are either below the minimum flow level determined for the ecology of the system, either below or projected to be below within 20 years. So across the state, there are many natural systems that are impacted by groundwater withdrawals. And on the right-hand side, you will see an image of one extreme example when something that used to be a spring now is a sinkhole. Of course, it used to be a very popular recreational destination, popular bathhouse. Now, no business, no visitors, and really a sad example of what used to be and what is now. So a summary of a bit gloomy story about Florida. Dish number one for your lunch buffet is that there are almost 20 million people relying on groundwater for domestic use in Florida. Again, population is about 21, 22 million. Almost all of them are on groundwater. Significant agricultural water withdrawals. Almost 50% of irrigation is from groundwater, and water scarcity and competition among urban, agricultural, and environmental water use. This image is from Everglades area, and you can see how city is encroaching into the environmental areas. So objective of this analysis is to examine statewide expenditures which are needed to meet growing water demand on the state level. The analysis is driven by the requirement in the Florida statute. The statute became law in 2017, and it requires the Office of Economic and Demographic Research to look at the statewide expenditures related to water quality, water demand, and flooding as well. So I'll be focusing today on expenditures necessary to achieve the legislature's intent that sufficient water is available for all existing and future reasonable beneficial uses and the natural systems. Schematically, this task can be illustrated with this simple graph. All, quote unquote, all we need to have is an estimate of existing supply, some projections of water demand, identification of water shortage, if any, and then analysis when this shortage would occur and how much in advance, how far in advance we need to start investing in water supply or water demand projects to prevent shortage. Today, I'll be presenting just a summary. I'll not show you the timeline for investments, but all this information is available in the EDR report, if you are interested. So, dish number two, description of water supply planning policies and programs in Florida. Florida is divided into 5 water management districts, and they originally were created around surface water watershed boundaries. You can see the water flow being different in each of the water management districts. And districts are charged with responsibilities related to water supply, water quality, flood protection, and natural system management. I'll present a simpler picture here and focus on water supply planning tasks for the water management districts only. So water management districts are required to conduct water supply assessment, which should look at 20-year planning horizon, look at the district-wide area, and examine existing water supplies and projected water demand for this district-wide area. Then, for the regions where water demand is expected to outstrip existing supplies, a more detailed, focused regional water supply plans must be developed. Water supply plans also look at 20-year planning horizon, and they present more detailed analysis of existing supplies and projected demand. As you can see on this map, almost whole state is colored with different shades, which means that almost all Florida has some issues related to water demand outstripping water supply. Almost all state is covered by regional water supply plans. This hatching indicates area where 2 or 3 water management districts work together. North Florida Regional Water Supply Partnership, 2 water management districts. Central Florida Water Initiative, 3 water management districts working together on water supply planning. As I mentioned, originally water management districts were created around surface water, watershed boundaries. Now we are focusing on groundwater use. So groundwater aquifers, they cross the border between the districts. So several districts have to cooperate. North Florida is a region around Jacksonville, Central Florida Water Initiative region around Orlando. Each water supply plan looks at 20-year time horizon, and they are updated every 5 years. So this water management district, regional water supply plans and water supply assessment provide a lot of information about water demand projected for the next 20 years, as well as existing supplies. So what I'm reporting today is based on districts' water demand and supply projections. At EDR, we are working on developing different water demand scenario right now. So maybe in future, I'll present you a comparison between district and EDR water demand projections. And of course, I'm really interested in water demand projections done in California. And a little bit more background for you if you want to orient around these regions. So Tampa, Sarasota, Naples, regions around are covered by different regional water supply plans. Jacksonville, Daytona Beach, Palm Beach, Miami, all in different regional water supply plans. Groundwater has traditionally been traditional water supply in most of the state, in most of the regions, not all of them, but most of the regions. In statute, there is a definition about alternative water supplies. So something alternative to traditional, which is groundwater. So alternative water supplies, salt water, brackish surface or groundwater, surface water capture, surface or groundwater storage, reclaimed water, the main one, storm water, and anything else. So this is something that districts and utilities, other water users are considering when they think about, well, what will happen if we run out of traditional groundwater? Here's a catalog of options. And then something else from water policy and regulation in Florida. What about natural systems? How to protect water flow or levels, which is necessary for ecology of a river or a stream or an aquifer or wetland. So recovery or prevention strategies are plans that are developed to either recover a water system or prevent water system from falling below a minimum water level. So minimum water level for lakes, wetlands, or aquifers, or minimum flow or minimum water levels for lakes, wetlands, aquifers, springs, etc. So recovery and preventions are developed around minimum flows and minimum water levels. And again, the map on the left demonstrate existing recovery and prevention strategies. Why are they important? Because they have a list of projects that are identified to recover a water system. So after this brief overview of a regulatory framework used in Florida to both ensure the future water demand is met and protect natural systems. Let's go back to the task of examining expenditures needed to meet the future water demand in the state. Based on regional water supply plans, we can look at existing supplies, projected demands, and we can estimate shortage that would occur if no investments are made. For the sake of time, I will not show demand projections for each region. This slide demonstrates a statewide summary of projections. And I know that some of the numbers, the values are a little hard to see, but I'm sure you notice a general trend that projections of water use follow population projections, this line on the top of the bar or on the top of the graph. And this tells you something about the method used by water management districts to project water demand. For most of the categories, water demand is projected based on the average per capita water use in the past 3 to 5 years. So it would be really interesting to see whether this approach can be refined, improved, how it compares with the historical water withdrawals. That's, again, something that EDR is working on right now. But for now, we look at this average per capita, sometimes per dollar in gross regional product, but mostly per capita, and project water use based on the population projections. Exception is agriculture. Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services works with a consultant company, Balmoral, and they have examined a database of metered water withdrawals for agricultural use. They related these historical water withdrawals to weather, prices for the main crops, and some other determinants. Based on the econometric model, they looked at the nationwide projections for agricultural commodity prices. And based on this, they projected future agricultural water use. So although in some regions, agricultural water use is projected to grow, statewide, ag water use will stay more or less constant. But the orange part of this bar you can see is growing fast, and this is water use for public supply. I believe that most of the questions will be handled at the end of the seminar. So I'll probably just continue.
If you want questions now, there could be.
Okay. Yes,
but it's up to you.
Yes, up to you. If you want, there is one question about the slide and.
Okay.
Yeah, it's up to you. Do you want to answer now or? Okay.
Yeah.
So, Arya, do you want to ask your question?
Yes.
I think yes. Go ahead.
So slide 19, which is exactly the slide that I had questions on. So you are projecting water uses, but for the future, you just multiply it by the number of, by the population, and you do not include any demand management or possible conservation responses. So do you have also some kind of sensitivity analysis that can show different scenarios of successes or less success of different projects or programs for demand management?
This is a great question, and I'll probably offer a couple answers. I like to offer several answers for every question. So one answer is that these water demand projections are based on the water management district's approach. And according to the statute, they develop 3 projections. Projections I'm reporting here are based on the average water use. I have another slide. Let me scroll up. Sorry, I'll scroll and then start sharing again. Okay, let me share the screen again. I hope you can see my slide now. So water management districts also have projections for drought year, and the drought is defined as an event that occurs, the rainfall that occurs once in 10 years. So the drought is based on likelihood of low rainfall event. You can see that water demand in this case will be about 15% higher. And water management districts also develop a scenario accounting for conservation, which, looking at these bars on this graph, show that conservation can reduce water demand compared with the average. Water demand would reduce by about 5%. The question is whether accounting for conservation using water management districts approach is the best option. Districts rely on conservation calculators available, for example, from Alliance for Water Efficiency or some of the tools developed by by University of Florida. They look at a set of conservation measures, they look at the participation rate, which is likely, etc. What we at EDR are hoping to do instead is to look at historical water withdrawals. Here's an example of agriculture. Historical water withdrawals from USGS data, as well as reclaimed water use from Florida Department of Environmental Protection. You can see that historical water use is very different from this line on the right-hand side, which is forecast developed by Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services and water management districts. So our goal is actually to develop either a time series or a panel analysis of historical water use and develop projections based on that. In this case, demand projections would account for conservation trends automatically. So that's work in progress, but it's a great question. I hope it answers the question.
Good to know. Yes, I was muted. Good to know, and thank you very much.
Okay, it's a great question. So I'll go back to the slide that is related to water supply. So as economists, we have very little room to contribute to water supply analysis. So we rely on data provided by water management districts. And districts use different approaches to estimate existing water supply. Here are a couple of examples. On the left-hand side, Suwannee River Water Management District's approach. You can see there is really one model which is used, in fact, by two districts that represents most of North Florida as well as part of South Florida. To project water supply using this model, water management districts assume some pattern of increase in groundwater withdrawals looking into the future. This pattern of groundwater increase is based on current population centers. For example, if it's city of Jacksonville, the projection is that water withdrawals in this particular location, groundwater withdrawals, will increase with the rate of population growth. So looking into the future, increase in groundwater withdrawals, they look at what level these withdrawals will trip minimum flow level for one of the sensitive natural systems in the area, in the domain of the model. So it does not mean that existing supplies represent water availability in each location in the water management district. It's really a regional analysis. Okay, this level of withdrawal, one system tripped, so this is probably the maximum withdrawal on the regional level. On the right-hand side, Southwest Florida Water Management District, you can see uses quite a few models because of complex hydrogeology, impact of saltwater intrusion, sensitivity of aquifers versus wetlands versus rivers, etc. So Southwest Florida Water Management District looks at local impacts. Their water supply estimate is based on analysis conducted for individual consumptive use permits. In Florida, all water users get permits. permits are issued for a period from 5 to 50 years. When permits are issued, local hydrogeological model is run and analyzed. So if the permit is issued, it means water withdrawals are available. So water supplies in these districts are based on comparison of existing withdrawals versus maximum allowable from the permits. So it's basically permitted unused volume. Very different approaches, but that's the best information available. So that's what we are using right now. And you'll notice that there is no discussion about drought impact here or conservation. So while in water demand analysis, we can have some room and scenarios development for water supply, we would really need to work with districts to see how this drought scenario would be reflected on supply side as well. So comparing water demand and supply from water management districts, we can come up with inferred shortage that would happen if no additional investments are made. And the areas of critical concerns are areas around Jacksonville and Orlando, North Florida Partnership and Central Florida, where by 2040, it is projected that 100 million gallons per day or almost 150 million gallons per day would be the gap between existing supplies from groundwater and future demands. Other regions, well, area around Daytona Beach, roughly speaking, so Central Springs and East Coast region, region where Miami is located, also have a gap between existing supply and demand, and other regions with some differences between demand and supply as well. Okay, so now we, based on the district's data, we have existing supplies, projected demand. So the next step would be to identify which projects are likely to be implemented in each region and how much these projects would cost. To do that, we rely on a database assembled by Florida Department of Environmental Protection. This database includes projects that were completed in the past using cost share data from either districts or from Department of Environmental Protection. So these are not all the projects, but just the projects that received some cost share. These are projects, the database also includes projects in design, construction, on hold, as well as future project opportunities or options. And this is a bit tricky category because these future options or opportunities are identified through discussions with water utilities, water users. They are required to be technically feasible and cost effective. However, they are not required to be planned, so to say. For example, one project can have different design specifications. They can all be feasible and economically, technically feasible. So all of them can be included into the list of future options. That's why we cannot directly use these options to forecast future expenditures. We still need to make some additional assumptions about which of these options may or may not be implemented. But overall, the database has capital costs for all projects, or most of them. We did some data cleaning. So we have capital costs. We indexed them to $2020. We have project capacity as well. The database also includes information about project type. And while there are a few water demand management projects, actually quite a few, agricultural conservation and public supply and commercial, industrial, institutional water conservation projects, we, for this analysis, largely focus on water supply development projects. Why is that? Because water demand management is not reflected in projects only. I mean, there is price effect, there are differences in land development patterns, etc. So water demand management projects may capture just the most expensive water demand management options, basically. So, and looking at the cost of this project, we also noticed they're pretty expensive. So we think that water supply development analysis, these projects are have much more realistic cost estimates. So we are focusing right now on water supply development options. You can see that many of the projects are brackish groundwater, reclaimed water, surface water, and surface water storage, but there are a few of other project types. So for reclaimed water, and this is one area where I would love to hear some feedback from you all. Based on agency analysis, water use efficiency for reclaimed water is much lower than water use efficiency for, say, tap water. Reclaimed water is available either for free or at a lower price. Reclaimed water is frequently used as a disposal mechanism for wastewater treatment plants. For example, areas, road medians would be irrigated, or areas around prisons would be irrigated, or areas in some parks would be irrigated with reclaimed water. And if reclaimed water is not available, these areas would not be irrigated. So looking at the analysis of beneficial offset assembled by Florida Department of Environmental Protection, we noticed that the volume of reclaimed water delivered compared with the reclaimed water which is used to offset groundwater, this ratio is actually 0.55. So 1 MGD of reclaimed water delivered offsets on average just 0.55 MGD of water from groundwater or surface water. So what we did in this analysis is we assumed this coefficient. So say we have 100 MGD reclaimed water project. We assume it's not 100 MGD that this project will produce, but 55 MGD of water that will be produced and used to meet future water demand. So this assumption really drives up the costs of reclaimed water projects. And I would love to hear again your feedback about other alternative ways to capture this difference in water use efficiency among different water use, water sources. Okay, so in addition to these types of projects, we also know project status, and many projects are in design, construction, or on hold status. So the first step for us is to account for these projects. Well, if these projects are constructed, gap between demand and supply would disappear for many regions. That's what we found, actually. Projects in design and construction in total cost about 340 million. And once we account for them, we are left with just 6 regions in Florida that still have a gap between demand and supply. And these regions are displayed on this map together with the remaining inferred shortage for each region. So the next step is to look at likely project types in these regions. This is a complex table, and I know the region names, abbreviations would probably be irrelevant for this audience. But if you look at the titles for each column, you would recognize project types, right? Aquifer storage and recovery, brackish groundwater, reclaimed water, and all the other project types. The different shading in this table indicate whether these project types are considered to be likely in a particular region. And this likely definition is based on 2 types of information. One is the consensus document developed by districts and Department of Environmental Protection. Another type of information we used is the options future options projects identified in the project database. And because you see a lot of colors and shading and hatching here, you see that these different data sources don't necessarily agree on what project types will be implemented. So what we decided to do is to look at the project types that that appear in all reports as a likely future water supply source. So that's a little bit cleaner table for you, that table that we used in our expenditure forecast. So reclaimed water is the type of water supply source that will be used across the state based on all information available to us. Breakage groundwater is very relevant to South Florida regions. Groundwater recharge is used in North Florida Regional Water Supply Partnership area, so North Florida. But all in all, in most of the regions, it's one or two project types that are most likely to be implemented to meet future water demand. We looked at average capacity, in fact, median capacity for different project types. And it's the same across the state, or for reclaimed water, it differs a little bit among regions based on statistical analysis. Next step for us was to look at the relationship between project expenditure and project capacity, accounting for project type and the region of implementation. Our regression model showed R-square of about 0.51, not great, but at least we can explain maybe 50% of variability in project costs. So we went with this model. And this is the analysis of project cost per MGD, per million gallons of day of capacity for different project types, for different regions. If you look at reclaimed water, for example, we can see that project cost per unit of capacity is much higher in North Florida, Southwest, and SWN means Southwest Florida Northern Region, 10 million per million gallons of water per day of capacity. It's a lot. This is because these projects are smaller in size in this region, and in general in North Florida, the projects, reclaimed water projects, tend to be more expensive. So this is just one example. If you look at the lower row in this table, you will see that districts have some flexibility in terms of maybe investing in one project type versus the other to reduce the costs a little bit. But all in all, putting all this information together, we have this summary table. We started with column number 2, inferred supply shortage in 2040. We then subtracted the water provided by projects already in design and construction, and we're left with column number 4, remaining shortage, remaining difference between demand and supply. From econometric model, we can estimate project expenditures for least expensive and most expensive project types, which are likely in this region. We can add on top of that costs of projects and design and construction already. And at the end, we come up with a range of project expenditures on the statewide basis from about $500 million to $1.1 billion. So this is the range. We are reporting it as a range of expenditures needed to meet future water demand in the state. And as a midpoint, we say, well, maybe we'll go this year with 852 as an average expenditure projection to meet the future water demand in the state. We also looked at the projects identified in the recovery and prevention strategies to meet the needs of the natural systems. Total project expenditures there are 1.3 billion, so higher than expenditures to meet the future water demand. And we also looked at EPA survey, water infrastructure needs assessment survey, and to maintain and improve existing infrastructure, Florida would need to invest about 24 billion. So huge investment needs. Questions are, what are the mechanisms available to generate this funding? Economic and demographic research, this office focuses on state level expenditures. For water demand projections, the expenditures needed to meet future water demand, state share is about 10% of these expenditures. So it seemed to be maybe not as high, but currently there is no dedicated source of revenue to meet these expenditures. So there is still a question, well, on the state level, how this gap between expenditures would be met. And this is just 10% of all expenditures. So regional, local level funding mechanism is something that is many local governments are investigating right now. Will demand management be a solution? Maybe this picture is too dark and our solution would be to maintain or reduce existing water use. And would this demand management be costless? That's another question. With that, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
More questions.
Thanks,
Okay.
Tatiana. It was a great presentation. We do have some questions.
Yes, I actually want to respond to Tatiana's invitation, and I have several points to make. I think that what the study that you have been initiating and involved in is an example of what I think every state that faces uncertainty in water supply should conduct, and this could be a good example and certainly a basis for collaboration. So let me do two things. One is to first of all tell you, you probably I don't know, because this is something that is related also to the state. So I don't know if the state wants to publish this kind of, besides publishing that report. So this is certainly something to consider for you. There is a special issue in the journal Water Economics and Policy that is guest edited by Mark Juland, that talks about infrastructure, and this is exactly a place for to consider. If you want, you can ask me more, later, by email. We can communicate, and I can give you more information. So this is one thing. Second thing, I think it's a great idea if the University of Florida, Gainesville, and or that what is the name of that organization? EDR will collaborate with the University of California, Riverside, and maybe we can also bring some of our state institutions to try and do a joint, not the same study, but joint application of similar approaches to address the same questions, because these are questions that California is facing every day. And I don't know, maybe I'm not updated on what is going on, but I'm not aware of a similar study in California, but maybe I'm wrong. So this is certainly something that, you on one side and Mehdi and me on the other side, you have an excellent opportunity now to develop some collaborative effort that may be developed into something that will bring more states and more groups. I think it's a great idea. So this is in general answering your questions. Now, let me also make another suggestion, or not suggestion, actually it's a question. I have two questions. One question is, in your portfolio of publications, you have many papers where you estimated demand functions. And I'm sure that the literature has And again, I don't know about Florida, how many do exist from Florida, but why not to try to maybe first of all to do a literature review, because all the time you are saying this is the data or this is the information that we have is not the perfect information. So I think that in the longer run, the type of study that you do, and if you can convince the EWR to put some money to conduct estimate demand functions in different parts of Florida. And I think this is something necessary because, this will remove all the, not all, but most of the dark parts that you don't have information on, and it will help you, I think. So this is an investment that will not be immediate reflected in a report, but it will be it will provide feedback that you can, or input that you can then use maybe a couple of years down the road, and this will make could make a big difference. So this is one suggestion. Another observation that I have, just a question: did you try to test the institution of water market to ease the relative scarcity of water between the 8 or 9 planning regions? So this is, again, I don't know if you did it or not, but this is something that, we have a class, Mehdi and me, on water economics and management, and water market is, in California, is a big, option for relieving scarcity problems in different parts of the state. So this is another thing. And the last point that I would like to mention is that it seems to me that many of the projects that, again, seems to me because I'm probably not fully familiar with what has been done in the study, but it seems to me that in the study, all those projects are projects that are, let's call it, regionally focused. So you have, let's say, a water development project that is only in one watershed, one water region. You did not include, there are some, but only 2, those shaded structures. In my opinion, this kind of an effort needs to include cooperation and projects that can include more than one water management region or whatever, I don't remember how you called it. Yeah. So again, these are just some observations, and
Tatiana, before you answer Arya's question, you ask all the questions that the audience asked. So, but just one point on the water markets. There is a possibility of trade, collaboration, whatever we want to call it, between the regions, and also is there a possibility between the sectors, right? So if ag saves and sends us to urban. And also there is another one between different states like Alabama and Georgia and Florida, just to add to that. So when you are responding, you can respond to these 2.
Yeah, these are great points. I really like the suggestion about looking at, say, demand function, developing a demand function for different regions. In the past, there have been one study looking at, say, long-term water demand elasticity, comparing it among regions. So we can rely on this data, maybe Florida specific, or looking at the literature from other regions. And I know University of Florida currently is working on developing a data hub, collaborating with water utilities in different parts of the regions and getting their water use account level, customer level water use information. So this project is ongoing. Would be really interesting to have access to this data as well. However, the coverage, the data coverage is sparse so far. I mean, there are quite a few utilities participating in this data hub, but well, it's a start. So I really like this suggestion. For the water markets, for economists, that's such a great area to consider, and it's one of the favorite topics, I guess, for us to discuss. In Florida, I think when we talk about this topic, maybe it would be more compatible, maybe more related to existing Florida structure, regulatory structure, to talk about, say, payment for ecosystem services. The water is, in Florida, water is allocated using consumptive use permits that are issued by water management districts. They cannot be traded, but I totally agree with the idea of, say, agricultural lands being used as a recharge area to replenish aquifer, and then neighboring city being able to withdraw higher volumes of groundwater because of the recharge provided by agricultural producers. So there are projects that look at these questions. But direct trading of the permits is something which is highly controversial in the state. So yeah, payment for ecosystem services would be a great topic to like collaborate maybe. I don't know in California how this issue is approached, say recharge versus withdrawals. So yeah, and I would really like to collaborate with University of California, Riverside about like comparing the water supply planning approaches in California and Florida.
That's a good start.
Yeah,
but let me also tell you, probably, anyone who wants to stay is fine. The fact that there is an existing institutional setting in the state that does not allow it is not a good reason not to try to show them what will be the social gain from having it. And maybe, you don't need to start with a permanent permit sale. You can start with a lease, for, a contingent lease of the right to use water during a year that is considered to be a drought year. But certainly economists have to show what is the social loss from not doing things correctly.
It's a good point, and it's a great idea to discuss, and it would be great to collaborate with researchers. What I'm trying to say here is that in extension, we are really focused on meeting the clientele informational needs. So before I start addressing questions like that, I need to find the clientele who would be interested. In fact, one topic which is very, make at least environmental groups very excited in Florida is charging for water withdrawals. Setting a price for water withdrawal as opposed to just permit-based allocation. That can be an example of a questions here that can be considered. Actually, one more point that Dr. Dinar made about regional cooperation.
Ariel.
Yeah, so I noticed quite a few projects in the database that would be called interconnection, when several utilities would connect their infrastructure and supply water, say when water is not available or demand is really high in one area, the neighboring utility would supply. And it was really hard to capture these expenditures into my database. So I really like how you identified this gap in the analysis, how to reflect the regional cooperation opportunities. Yeah.
Okay, no, that was a great, again, I already listened to your presentation in the past, in the seminar, but this was a big, not for me, a big additional understanding of what you have done.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity for me, and I hope to talk and exchange emails about publication and collaboration opportunities.
There is
We are ready.
There is few more questions. We are at the hour, but I will just ask. We have it in the for those that are staying. Have you considered climate change effects on water demand projections, especially for agriculture, since we saw this is really constant over time? Is that the option or scenario or in the report that people can go and see?
I have not seen analysis like that. I know that both agencies and universities are trying to reflect climate change impacts. One issue I think that researchers at UF at least have been looking at is developing climate change projections for the Florida, so I guess downscaling the projections. I'm not sure I'm using the right terminology here, but that's the first step. And but I have not seen the Florida-focused analysis of impact of climate change on water use. Nationwide level analysis, yeah, I've seen reports from ERS, for example, but
yeah.
I guess they are being developed as we speak.
Yeah. And there are more questions, and I apologize to the attendants. We cannot go to all of them, but there's one, and this is the last one. When you show us the graph of supply and demand projections, you show that supply is constant over time. Is that do we need investments to keep that constant over time? Is that something you consider or not?
That's excellent point. This is a part of, I guess, infrastructure investments that we assume are outside the scope of the analysis or are addressed in a different chapter of the report, basically. Yes, that's excellent point that we assume the cost of maintaining supply zero for the presentation that I've given today. But there is another chapter that is trying to assess the costs. And yeah, the best estimate we have is this 23 billion that are based on EPA survey.
Thank you very much. Again, I will send you like list of the questions that that people ask, so we can get back to them. But I'm going to end it here. And as a matter of fact, next month on May, we have a presentation on California water markets. There is a pilot in California that is being on groundwater markets, and that would be next month's water seminar series, which we will share the information pretty soon. Thanks, Tatiana, for presenting today. I'm really excited about this. I'm going to read the full report after this week. So looking forward to talking to you in person sometime soon.
Thank you for the opportunity and feedback and comments. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tatiana, and be in touch.
That's good.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.